In this video, we will learn how to animate this seamless scene transition all in After Effects. And you can get all the illustrations used in this video, including 3 more high quality scene illustrations in a pack of 5 from our website, which I will link in the description and also in the pinned comment. So now let's jump into Adobe Illustrator first. Okay, so we're in Adobe Illustrator. So in Adobe Illustrator, first thing we have done is we have actually extended the overall illustration by simply duplicating and merging the layers so that we can easily move these elements in x-axis to get a proper parallax effect. Now let's jump into Adobe After Effects. Alright, so we're in After Effects and here we have imported the first illustration, the mountain scene, and then we have the windmill scene. Okay, so the composition we are in right now is in 30 fps. Now let's get into the mountain scene first. So this is the element that we will be using to transition our scene. What I will do is first create a rectangle shape, then put it below this tree layer, and then select all the other layers and simply use this layer as an alpha track matte, and then just parent this matte layer with the foreground tree. Now if we move these trees, we get a proper transition. Okay, now what we will do is simply get back to the main scene, then lock this composition window and then open the mountain composition into a separate composition window. Okay, now we will start with the transition animation. So let's select the foreground tree layer and let's open the position property. Let's separate the dimension and we will only animate the X position. Now let's move the playhead around 2 minutes 20 seconds, and here let's add another keyframe. So from here we are actually going to start our transition animation, and then again move the playhead around 4 minutes 10 seconds, and we will add another keyframe. Then let's move the playhead on the second keyframe and let's move the tree slightly in the x-axis to add a little bit of camera pan movement with a little parallax effect, and then move the playhead at the very end. Let's copy and paste this keyframe and we are simply going to move this tree outside the screen, and let's easy ease the keyframe. Let's move on to the motion graph editor. Let's go to the value graph and let's try to make the motion graph smooth, and at the end we are making the bezier handle stiff. Okay, now it's time to add more parallax effect. So let's select this railings layer and let's open the position property, separate the dimension, then add keyframes, and let's move on to the second keyframe and slightly move the railing in the x-axis. At the same time, I would like to track the distance that has been covered from here to here, so that we have to animate the elements such a way that the elements that are closer to the camera should move faster or will cover more distance in that particular time frame compared to the elements that are behind the camera. So this railing is of course behind the foreground tree, so it should move less or cover less distance than the foreground trees. And now we can simply copy the motion graph editor with the is copy plugin and paste it on this 3 set of keyframes. Alright, so this one looks good to me. Now let's close this window, we don't need it anymore, and only work with this one. So again we will just repeat the process, open the position property and separate the dimension and add keyframes on the x-axis. So we will basically add a parallax effect with the x position keyframes for all the layers that are behind this tree. And while I'm animating the elements in x-axis, I'm also making sure that the distance that is covering in that point of time is decreased as we are moving away from the camera. Okay, now that we have animated all the elements of this scene in x-axis to add that helix effect, finally we will also add an x-axis movement to this entire composition. So let's separate the dimension again and let's add a keyframe. Let's move the playhead uh, around here, and let's add a keyframe around here, and let's add a keyframe. So at the start, we will just simply move the entire composition to add a little camera pan movement, and at the end, again, add some movement in the x-axis to animate that transition. So let's again paste the motion graph from the is copy. Alright, so this is how it looks now. Now it's time to animate the scene 2 transition. Okay, now let's animate the second half of the transition with scene 2. So now let's get inside the composition of the windmill scene. Open the position property, then separate the dimensions. Add keyframes on the x-axis, and again we have to match the timing with the movement of the scene 1. Let's add keyframe on the position property here, and we are also going to add some camera pan and slight camera zoom in animation uh, after the transition. So let's add keyframes over here. All right, now let's animate the foreground element first. And at the end, we will add a little camera pan and also a camera zoom in effect as well. So let's also add a keyframe on the scale property, and let's slightly zoom in by about 110%, and then just easy is the keyframes. So let's move on to the motion graph editor, get to the value graph, and make the bezier handle stiff at the start, and then make the entire motion graph a bit smooth. Also, for the zoom in keyframes, we would like to pull in the bezier handle from both the ends to increase a little bit of hang time. Now just repeat the process for the other layers. And once the layers are animated, we will simply copy and paste the motion graph editor from the first layer. And finally, for the final touch, we will also animate the entire composition of the second scene. So let's open the position property, separate the dimension, and add keyframe on the x-axis. Okay, now we will animate the entire composition of the windmill scene. So let's add a keyframe on the x-axis of the position, then here as well, and one keyframe here as well. And also add keyframes on the scale property, and just animate the position property based on the timing of the elements inside this composition. And also let's copy the motion graph from the Y position property and paste it over here. And for the scale again, we will scale up this entire scene and just copy the motion graph of the scale keyframes and paste it over here. Alright, so this is how our final animation turned out. And if you want to learn how I have animated this windmill animation, then I have a dedicated detailed lesson on that. I will be linking that in the description, you can check it out. And until then, I will see you in the next video.